On September 21st, 2018, the gaming world was shocked to hear about the immediate and abrupt shutdown of Telltale Games, with news spreading that 90% of its staff was laid off, with only 25 employees remaining to finish up a few projects. This took many people by surprise given the company's success in the past few years, and proved especially tragic for longtime fans of the Walking Dead game series, which had just started its fourth and final season, as well as the cancellation of the highly anticipated second season of The Wolf Among Us. While the death of Telltale Games can be attributed to a toxic management culture of perpetual crunch time and the overreach of the now infamous executive Kevin Brunner, whose abrasive nature forced some of the best developers who'd ever worked at the company to leave for new pastures. We are here today to put this current incarnation of Telltale Games to rest. We are not here to condemn the company for its failings. The failings of bad management, the failings of firing its entire staff without any kind of severance pay. Because those are not just Telltale's failings. They are the failings of an industry that is notorious for abusing its workforce. Instead, we are here to eulogize its success. To pay tribute to the unfulfilled promise of taking the storytelling of gaming to the next level. Because the story of Telltale Games is the story of Icarus. The story of someone who came too close to the sun and was burned for trying to touch the sky. You gotta love to be gone back yet. Love is a 10, don't you grab it. So the great debate about storytelling in gaming is one that is almost as old as the medium itself. It generally falls into two camps. There's the school of thought that follows the lines of the infamous John D. Carmack quote, where he said that the story in a game is a lot like the story in a porn movie. It's expected to be there, but it's not important. Then there's the other school of thought that games are art and are just as valid of a storytelling medium as comics, film, TV, or literature. I tend to fall into the later camp of thought, and as someone who's seen gaming grow from a niche hobby into a globe-conquering industry, I also have been waiting to see gaming cross over into the realm of cultural acceptance that those other mediums have. And perhaps that's why the death of Telltale Games hits me on a personal level. I feel like they were the closest to bridging that gap, that their series of adventure games were a stopgap solution on the path towards something greater. While some people might not give a shit about the stories in their games, for me there is no greater pleasure than when the storytelling in a game perfectly lines up with the flow of gameplay, when my motivations are completely aligned with the character I'm playing and everything is in sync. The experience becomes something more engaging than any book or movie, something that has me completely immersed and emotionally engaged. It's an experience that not every game is capable of delivering, but it's a high I'm always seeking out, always trying to replicate whenever I hit that start button. In terms of what the best method of how to deliver that, though, is something game designers are still struggling with. There's the Hideo Kojima school of thought, where everything can be boiled down to a stream of endless cutscenes, but many argue that is not something that tailors to the medium strengths of interactivity, that just watching shitty movies made in in-game engine is a lazy way to tell a story. Then on the other hand, we have scripted in-game set pieces. These scripted sequences take inspiration from Half-Life and have become prevalent in big-budget game releases like the annual Call of Duties and Battlefields. But the problem with scripted set pieces, as cool as they might look, is that they're essentially the gaming equivalent of theme park rides. They're usually on rails and the player has little effect on them and is just forced to go along on the ride. They're great for press conference demonstrations, but they're not exactly very interactive and aren't determined by any player agency, which is why something like the web slinging in Insomniac's recent Spider-Man game will always be more impressive than some giant set piece because it's an active gameplay mechanic that is directly driven by player agency. This is something many game designers have struggled with, like Hideo Kojima, Ken Levine, and Peter Molyneux, and no one has really succeeded in creating a story-driven game where player choice and interactivity is something that can define the narrative dynamically. The best we've seen are usually branching paths that take you down different story trees, and that is still a challenge that game designers are still fighting to overcome. But the magic of Telltale games is that while they didn't necessarily fix the problem in and of itself, they came up with a neat little magic trick to give players the illusion of choice and agency. Fundamentally, Telltale games of the pre- and post-Walking Dead eras are exactly the same type of games. They're all episodic adventure games based on different licenses. The design tenets of something like the revival of Sam & Max and Monkey Island is largely the same as the later episodic adventure games featuring more mature licenses. But the key difference is context. In a comedic setting, player agency and choice don't really hold much weight. But a much more gravely serious setting of The Walking Dead, decisions that can determine who lives and dies carry much more weight. Nothing better demonstrates this than my favorite sequence in the entire first season of The Walking Dead. Lee and his group of survivors are holding out, and Lee is given the responsibilities of distributing what little food they have to the people he deems worthy, as they are all slowly starving to death. There are more mouths to feed than there are items of food to share.
Hey, Doc, how about a little food? Here.
Yeah! Oh man, I'm so hungry!
Here, Clem, you need something to eat.
I love apples. Thank you. Are there more?
No, honey. That was the last one.
Oh,
Enjoy it. You deserve it. Here.
I don't want anything from you.
Take it anyway. You need to eat.
This doesn't change anything.
Some of these people have gone longer than me without food. They're the ones that need it.
Will you hold the damn board steady?
I'm trying. I didn't realize I was getting this weak already.
What do you want? A handout? Oh, I got 60 cents in my pocket, if you'll shut up and quit being such a pansy.
Lily thinks we should throw these new people out.
Damn right. There's too many people hanging around here as it is.
You've got to talk to Lily about getting along with Kenny.
Lily can make her own friends.
It's not about making friends. We're all in this together. We gotta start acting like it.
Stuff all that. We'd be fine without you.
Need any help with the wall?
Nope.
Actually, we could use your axe. You mind if we take it?
Yeah, give us that thing for a bit.
Here, this should help. Try not to make too much noise.
Yeah, we're not stupid.
Come on, Larry. Cut Lee some slack. He knows you're just out to protect Lily. He told me so. Just like he's trying to protect Clementine.
Oh, I just need some food. Going this long without a proper meal make anybody cranky.
Here, Larry. Lily would want you to keep your strength up.
That girl needs to quit worrying about me so much.
Oh, man. Just seeing the food is driving me crazy.
Not such an easy job, is it?
It's okay. I know you're still watching out for me.
I love this moment for a lot of reasons, but the main one is that this is the kind of thing that people who think about the zombie apocalypse fantasize about. What would you do in order to survive? How would you ration out important essentials like food? It puts you directly in the grim reality that everyone has thought about in the back of their minds, and the execution is good enough to become something haunting as we see the consequences of our choices. Unfortunately, from a gameplay standpoint, no matter who you give the food to doesn't change things that much, and in the overall scheme of the game's story is largely inconsequential. But the sheer novelty of giving players the illusion of making dramatic life and death decisions was something that made a great impact, a far greater impact than their previous adventure game of Jurassic Park, which just relied on cheap QuickTime events for action sequences, but nobody cared about that since you were largely responsible for keeping your character alive, not someone else. But the great direction, methodical pacing, and wonderful character writing helped elevate the Telltale Walking Dead game into something special, something that was far more than the sum of its parts. While the player could only control so much of the story, their decisive decision points helped the players craft their own narrative, but sadly, if you replayed the game to see the different choices, the illusion of player agency was something that would be shattered. While the player could only control so much of the story, their decisive decision points helped players craft their own narrative. But sadly, if you replayed the game to see the different choices, the illusion of player agency was something that would be shattered. For example, let's look at the different ways the death of Ducky in Episode 3 in Season 1 is handled.
Give me the gun, kid. I'll do it.
I can't. Let's just go.
Let's go.
You can't save Ducky, but you can have a choice in giving context to how his ultimate fate finally plays out. And this is something we don't see very often, and something not really seen in games in general. High emotional stakes that feel as weighty as saving the galaxy. While I don't think anyone is rushing towards making a video game version of Sophie's Choice or Schindler's List, I do feel the choices and consequences seen in The Walking Dead are the closest we've come towards translating some of the darker elements of the human experience into something seen in gameplay, and that is how The Walking Dead managed to rise above other similarly themed zombie games. Another achievement of Telltale is that for years, futurists have been saying how we'd be seeing a merging of the world of television and gaming. How we'd have more episodic games where we'd get a playable 2-hour chunks that would be released each week, similar to how you would get a new episode of your favorite TV show to tune into each week. It was something many people tried but mostly failed on, with such examples being the still unfinished episodic expansions of Half-Life 2, which were completely abandoned. The 2018 release of Alone in the Dark, which featured segments of the game that were divided into TV-style chunks, like episodes, that even included a previously on segue between each one.
Previously on Alone in the Dark. My God. Who the hell am I?
I'm Sarah Flores. I'm an art dealer. You're not a cop, are you?
I don't actually remember anything prior to waking up this evening.
Edward, he doesn't recognize me. I'm Theophile Paddington. A large part of your memories have been sacrificed in the process. This is what I released you from, Edward. What was trapped in the stone. We must reach the park.
Or the Quantum Break video game, where they literally shoved an entire live-action TV show to break up the narrative between gameplay, with Remedy's optimal way of playing the game being jumping back and forth between playing the game and watching the 4 episodes of television that were produced to coincide alongside it. Suffice to say, there was never a sequel or season 2 of Quantum Break. The only ones who ever succeeded at making the episodic method of gaming work were Telltale Games, and that was only when they took the kitty gloves off and added real weight and consequences. That's when they had something special. It was the kind of gaming that replicated the water cooler discussion and moments of the current golden age of television we're living in right now. And for me, as one of those people who's always wanted to see gaming rise up from being a dumb hobby you're expected to grow out of into a culturally accepted form of mainstream entertainment, this felt very exciting. It was something you could play in a group, like binge watching your favorite TV show, where you could determine the outcome. It felt like this could be the cusp of something that would redefine the nature of entertainment itself.
For the record, I tried to walk away from this, but the game made me straight.
In fact, there was a deal between Telltale and Lionsgate to create a super show. Something that would take a live-action television and combine it with the interactive choice of a Telltale game to create a hybrid that the world has never seen before. But it was too good to last, and sadly, this is a magic trick you can only pull off once or twice. One of the problems that killed them in the long run was that Telltale assumed that they could keep on slotting in new licenses into their formula without changing the core formula, and once you see the wizard behind the curtains, all of the magic suddenly drains away. The illusion of choice is gone, and all you're left with is a 10-hour machinima movie filled with lazy QuickTime events. And as the market was saturated with Telltale games that failed to recapture the magic of the original Walking Dead, like Guardians of the Galaxy and Game of Thrones, then people's enthusiasm began to waver as well. Even I found myself less excited as time went on, as the formula was repeated and the market was flooded with several different game series seasons all going on at once. The studio needed time to grow, to update its technology, to come up with new tricks, but it never got the chance. Thanks to poor management, it was on a never-ending death march, burning up its best talent, and so the chosen one that was supposed to bring us to the promised land became the villain, that fired its entire staff with no notice, no severance, and stripped their medical benefits. All that remains of their legacy is bitterness, disappointment, ash, and lawsuits. Clementine's story, the mascot of the entire studio, who we've seen persist through 4 seasons, will see her final game unfinished. The highly sought-after second season of The Wolf Among Us will never see the light of day. And the final vestiges of Telltale will be their Minecraft story mode game put out on Netflix. And maybe this is a larger story we see time and time again. A little indie studio sees great success, becomes a mini major, but the burden of maintaining that success rots it from its core. But even in the twilight of its demise, its legacy lives on. The 2 developers who were instrumental in leading the first season of The Walking Dead to success, Jake Rodkin and Sean Vanneman, founded their own studio of Campo Santo and released the critical darling game Firewatch. Don't Nod Entertainment's episodic game series Life is Strange, which takes heavy inspiration from the Telltale formula, is alive and kicking. Veteran Iranian game designer Naveed Khosari utilized the format for his video game depicting the Iranian Revolution in 1979 Revolution Black Friday, and it's something you can play right now. And that is the fundamental truth about game design. It is an iterative process. Where someone might fall, another might pick up the torch and continue their legacy. The cover mechanic from the largely ignored third-person shooter Killswitch was taken and improved by Epic Games and formed the backbone of the Gears of War series, and now is the foundation of how cover is handled in all third-person shooters. That's just one example. So in the next few years, we might see the next generation of developers take the lessons from Telltale Games and build upon them. Or someone with a lot of money might rescue the studio from the brink of death and correct the poor decisions of the past. As of right now, the studio is dead, and as they like to always point out in their games, we'll remember them. So in a way, I think it's fitting that I'm using the overused meme of press F to pay respects to their legacy. Telltale Games tried to bring something emotional to something that was always seen as nothing more than a bland game mechanic. And for a time, they succeeded, but they never took the time to grow past it, which is why we are here today, pressing F to pay our respects to the legacy of work they've left behind, and hope that their memory will inspire the creators and innovators who will follow forward into the future.